king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 188 Borrowing People. As the training continued, Marin suddenly discovered that there were many problems in the army. The biggest problem was the quality of the officers. You know, in the entire army, except for Marin, Schwartz and Frundsberg, 3 people from knight families, everyone else is illiterate. Although there are quite a few smart ones among these illiterate soldiers, who are more suitable to be squad leaders, these illiterate soldiers are not suitable for the position of company captain. For example, a company of 250 people may be sent to perform a single mission. Some missions are more complex and cannot be fully expressed verbally. The messenger is also illiterate and cannot remember too much, so written orders are needed. However, if the company commander is illiterate, then it's all over. A long order is difficult for the messenger to dictate. In the end, the company commander can only be dumbfounded. Therefore, it is also very important to find a company commander who can understand orders. Marin's current army has a total of 5,000 people, not counting the 1,000 Frisian prisoners of war, with a total of 20 companies. It can be said that Marin is in urgent need of talents like company commanders. Of course, Marin could also organize literacy classes to teach his men to read and write. However, this would be too late because he would have to send troops this year. Not only Marin was worried, Schwartz and Frundsberg were also very worried. The acting company leaders in their phalanx were illiterate and only suitable to be mouthpieces, not company leaders. In this regard, Schwartz and Frundsberg came to Marin to discuss how to solve this problem. In fact, the most suitable people to be company captains are those wandering knights. These people are well educated and skilled in martial arts, and can subdue those big-headed soldiers. Moreover, wandering knights have basically learned simple military command methods when they were at home, so they are considered professional counterparts. However, Marin had tried to recruit those wandering knights who came to visit him on Texel Island, but he failed to recruit any of them. And the literate civilians may not necessarily become officers. Because, in addition to being literate, officers must also have courage and force, otherwise they cannot obey those soldiers. Moreover, in the era of cold weapons, the courage of grassroots officers is very important. If the officers take the lead in running away, the army will surely collapse. Therefore, the best way is to recruit those wandering knights. However, Marin could not send people to the inland areas of Germany to recruit wandering knights openly. Because once he recruited wandering knights openly, it would leak military secrets. For example, the information that he recruited 5,000 soldiers could be easily known. Once this news leaks out, it will arouse the vigilance of the countries surrounding the Wadden Islands. The most direct consequence is that East Frisia may strengthen its vigilance. If East Frisia strengthens its vigilance, the difficulty of attacking Emden will increase exponentially, which is definitely not what Marin wants to see. How can I recruit enough wandering knights without attracting attention? Marin fell into deep thought. Master, how about we ask the eldest master for help? Schwartz suggested. No, absolutely not. Adler hasn't given birth to a son yet, and Dad won't agree to let him go to the battlefield. Then shall we go to the Teutonic Knights to borrow some people? Borrow someone? Marin was a little confused. Didn't you say that there are many wandering knights in the Teutonic Knights? With so many wandering knights, why can't you borrow some of them first? Once you conquer East Frisia and become a count, some people will be willing to join you. Marin thought about it, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Good idea. Let's go borrow someone. But, sir, the people you borrow must be returned eventually. Frundsberg hesitated. It's okay. I have an idea. We can find those newly minted wandering knights and trick them every day. I don't believe they won't stay. So we should send someone to Teutonic Kingdom to borrow people now. No, I'll go to Clifford City myself. What do you mean? Before, Grand Master Philip asked John II to organize the wandering knights of the Principality of Clever and the Earldom of Mark to join him. Can I borrow 20 people from John II in the organization? Will John II lend it to you? We are allies. If it doesn't work out, I can give him some salt quota every year so that he can make a small fortune. The refined salt that Marin made was not bitter, but it was very popular. Giving some to John II and letting him be the exclusive distributor in the Principality of Clever and the State of Mark would be no problem. Who made him the boss of these 2 countries? How do you explain to Manager Wright? It's okay. The amount I give to Wright every year is actually not enough for him to sell. Besides, Wright has now expanded his market to the upper reaches of the Rhine River and is no longer limited to the area around Cologne. The loss of the Principality of Clifford and the Earldom of Mark will not affect his ability to sell out the salt. The next day, Marin led dozens of thugs, each riding 2 horses, and quickly rushed to Clifford City. John II warmly received Marin, but when Marin asked to lend him people, John II was a little embarrassed because these people were supposed to be sent to the Teutonic Kingdom to help his brother. Although Marin was an ally, he could not compare with his brothers. Therefore, John II hoped to give these people to his brothers to help Prince Philip take control of the Teutonic Kingdom as soon as possible. I wonder if the Duke has heard of the Wigan's Chamber of Commerce's premium non-bitter refined salt. Marin knew it was not easy, so he had to use his ultimate move. Of course I have heard of it. That kind of refined salt is snow white and crystal clear, and it doesn't taste bitter. It is indeed the best salt. Now, my court has switched to using this kind of salt instead of the bitter Lüneburg salt. What if I can get a large quantity of this salt and let you sell it on my behalf? What? So, Marin explained to John II the concept of regional agency sales that was popular in later generations. To put it bluntly, it was to allow John II to monopolize the sales of unbittered salt in the Principality of Clever and the Earldom of Mark. At present, the price of non-bitter refined salt in the Principality of Clever is at least 6 shillings per quarter, and this is the wholesale price. However, the price that Marin gave to Wright was only 3 shillings and 9 pfennigs. The profit was still very large. Moreover, Marin also instilled the shameless means of salt monopoly into John II, instigating John II to monopolize the salt trade in the country. The more John II listened, the brighter his eyes became. When Marin finished speaking, his eyes had already lit up like searchlights. What a great idea! Baron Marin, can you really find me so much non-bitter salt? And a stable and large supply? Of course, we can produce non-bitter refined salt on our island. What? So you also provided the non-bitter refined salt of the Wigan's Chamber of Commerce? John II stood up in shock. He finally understood why Marin could give out 100,000 gold coins to support his brother to become the Grand Master of the Teutonic Group. The non-bitter refined salt business is a sure win, and a big win. Ahem. That's not the case. I'm just one of the partners of the Wigan's Chamber of Commerce. The main partner of the Wigan's Chamber of Commerce is actually in the UK. And I found a bay with very high quality seawater, so I can produce a lot of non-bitter refined salt. Well, you know, the quality of salt is related to seawater. Marin began to fool John II. Anyway, John II doesn't understand science. Oh. I see. Although he didn't understand, John II was a big shot with a sense of dignity, and he wouldn't say he didn't understand. So he simply pretended to understand and nodded. Just like those big leaders who inspected the high-tech development zone, they clearly didn't understand high technology, but they kept nodding, as if they understood everything. Next, Marin and John II agreed that Marin would provide. In fact, this amount is not much, but the population of the Duchy of Clever and the Earl of Mark is not large. Moreover, among ordinary people, some poor people simply cannot afford non-bitter refined salt. Therefore, it is good enough that these experiences can cover half of the residents of the two countries. The other half of the poor also need to import some relatively bitter Lüneburg mineral salt. However, whether it is refined salt or bitter salt, John II intends to monopolize the business according to Marin's instructions. After reaching a cooperation agreement, John II was very happy. Therefore, John II directly sent 28 of the 60 wandering knights from the Mark Kingdom to Marin, who was going to be sent to the Teutonic Knights. He also promised to keep it a secret. Marin also happily took these 28 people back, and he made up his mind, although it was borrowed, he planned to learn from Liu Bei borrowing Jingzhou, and this group of people would not be returned. Chapter 189 Merchant Ship Arrives. When Marin brought the 28 abducted apprentice knights to Denburg, Kohler ran over. "Master, the ship has arrived, the ship has arrived." "What ship has arrived?" Marin was stunned. There were countless ships on Texel Island, many merchant ships docked at Thurench, and many fishing boats docked at Odeschild. Marin didn't know which ship Kohler was talking about. "They are the 2 schooners you ordered in Lübeck." "Ah. So it's them." Malinping patted his head and remembered. When he left the Teutonic Knights in January, Malin made a detour to Lübeck and ordered 2 200-ton Keck sailing ships for trade with the Teutonic Knights. Now, several months later, Lübeck had indeed finished building the 2 ships. Of course, it was Marin who placed the 2 ships in 2 shipyards. If they were placed in one shipyard, they might not be built at the same time. After all, there is always a sequence of arrangements in a shipyard. The 2 ships were completed very close to each other, only 5 days apart. During the 10 days when Marin went to the Principality of Clifford, the 2 ships docked at the dock of Thurench, and Kohler arranged to pay the balance. Then, the 2 huge cargo ships docked at the port of Thurench. However, Marin suddenly remembered that he didn't seem to have prepared sailors specifically for these two merchant ships. Marin was so depressed that he just slapped his head, but he suddenly remembered that the Frisian warship he captured before also had sailors. However, those sailors were temporarily arranged to work on the farm. When Columbus was sent on the Great Voyage last time, only 80 of the more than 200 Frisian sailors who were captured with Captain Kidd were sent out, and there were still more than 100 people who were not sent out. Originally, Marin didn't trust the remaining sailors. However, since the Frisian Noble Republic was destroyed by the Duke of Saxony, the original bosses of these sailors were all gone, so they naturally returned to their loyalty. Therefore, Marin arranged for those people to control the remaining 3 warships and cruise in the open sea. Now, Marin needed to send people to operate the 2 new ships to trade with the Teutonic Kingdom, and naturally thought of those sailors. So Marin ordered to select 40 more honest sailors from the remaining 160 sailors, and together with another 40 young Frisian fishermen selected by Marin, they formed a crew team to officially take over the 2 ships. In addition, Marin also selected 20 gunners who could fire cannons and took several cannons with them. In order to ensure the safety of the ship, Marin decided to arrange 2 warships to escort the 2 ships for their first trade. Because, although there are few pirates in the Danish and Baltic seas, it does not mean that there are no pirates. There are many novice sailors on the ship, who are not very courageous. For the first time, in order to give these novices courage, Marin decided to send 2 warships to escort. You know, doing business in the Teutonic Knights is different from Columbus going to India. Because the route to India has not yet been opened, there are basically no pirates on that route. However, there are some small-scale pirates on the route from the North Sea to the Baltic Sea. These pirates are very smart to survive the attacks of the Danish Navy and the Hanseatic Navy. Normally, they disguise themselves as ordinary fishermen. They would not provoke powerful merchant ships, but would take the opportunity to attack lone merchant ships. Moreover, these people have been fishing and working as pirates at sea for many years, so they have sharp eyes and can see clearly which ships can be provoked and which ships cannot be provoked. Because it was the first trade voyage, Marin was actually quite nervous. So he sent 2 warships to escort. This escort was not only to protect the 2 brand new merchant ships, but also to declare that these 2 ships had a backer. Those pirates were not stupid enough to survive the crackdown by the 2 major forces. They generally would not touch merchant ships backed by warships. Otherwise, if they were forced into a corner, they would directly send warships to stay for a long time and capture any fishing boats they saw, and they would definitely be able to find the pirates. This happened before. A merchant ship belonging to the King of England was looted in the waters near Denmark. Then, the furious King of England sent out warships, together with the Danish warships, to block the sea area where the incident occurred and arrest any fishermen they encountered. Then, a fisherman who was caught happened to know the news of the pirates and reported them for his own freedom. Then, the British wiped out the entire fishing village of the pirates who were hiding so deeply. Therefore, these surviving pirates are also quite wary of merchant ships with backers. This time, Marin also happened to be flying the British flag. The reason why the British flag was used was because Britain was also a maritime power. Moreover, Britain and Denmark had a good relationship, and the Danes would not embarrass the British. Marin had wanted to fly the flag of the Hanseatic League before, but he found out that the Hanseatic League of the Wendy business circle headed by Lubeck was a mortal enemy of Denmark and had conflicts with them many times. If he flew the flag of the Hanseatic League, the Danes might be angry and detain the ship. So, Marin thought about it and decided to fly the British flag and pass through the Danish waters. When he reached the waters controlled by the Hanseatic League, he would change to the flag of Königsberg. Moreover, the reason why Marin dared to fly the British flag was that his crew were basically Frisians. The language of the Frisians, Frisian, is very close to English. Even the Danes could not tell the difference between Frisian and English. Anyway, it was amazing to let the Frisians pretend to be British. In fact, Marin didn't know that his decision greatly enhanced the safety of his merchant ship. Because the British had retaliated against the pirates on this route once, and their reputation was very high among the pirates. As long as the British flag was hoisted, ordinary pirates would not dare to take action. If Marin chose to fly his own flag, the Wadden Islands were so unknown that the chances of being robbed by pirates were very high. Of course, that was without a warship escort. After the ships and sailors were ready, Marin began to order the workers to load the stored salt onto the ships for shipment to Königsberg. The salt was sold at only 4 shillings per quarter in the local market, but when it was shipped to Königsberg, the wholesale price reached 10 shillings, which was 2.5 times the local price. Moreover, because they had the license of Grand Master Philip, nominally, the 2 ships belonged to Grand Master Philip. As the supreme leader of the Teutonic Kingdom, did Grand Master Philip need to pay taxes for his merchant ships? Obviously not. Therefore, Marin's 2 merchant ships not only had the license to sell salt in the Teutonic Kingdom, but also saved import tariffs, which was a great trade advantage. On the return trip, the 2 ships could also load timber, fur, and other local specialties that were abundant in Eastern Europe and bring them back to sell. Although the profits were far less than those from the salt trade, it was still profitable. Chapter 190, Death of Charles VIII. While Marin was training and trading on Texel Island, another thing that Marin was happy to see. In the Louvre Museum in Paris, Charles VIII, who was only 28 years old, lay on the sickbed with a haggard face and a look of death. Originally, Charles VIII was in good health and was planning a second invasion of Italy. After several years of recuperation, France finally recovered. Unfortunately, on March 24, 4 days later than originally planned, Anne gave birth to a baby boy. Originally, Annie was supposed to give birth to a baby girl and name her Annie. However, perhaps the appearance of Marin triggered a butterfly effect, and Annie gave birth to a boy. Charles VIII was very happy and named the child Henry. Unfortunately, Henry was born in the morning but died in the evening. Charles VIII was struck by lightning and fainted instantly. After waking up, his spirit was also somewhat broken. The child who died that day was his 7th child. None of his 7 children survived. The longest-lived child was his eldest child, Charlie Orlando, who lived to be 2.5 years old. After that, no child lived long. After Henry of France died, Charles, who believed in God, wondered if he had been abandoned by God. From that day on, Charles VIII seemed to lose interest in handling government affairs, and spent his days hiding in front of the statues in the palace to pray and atone for his sins. Charles VIII was the only male direct descendant of the Valois dynasty. If he left no offspring, the demise of the Valois dynasty would basically be a foregone conclusion. Therefore, Charles VIII was now filled with fear of his own childlessness. He thought that his invasion of Italy had angered God. Because he had bullied Pope Alexander VI. Unfortunate experiences and delusions finally overwhelmed this shrewd king. Charles VIII finally fell ill. But to make matters worse, his Queen Anne did not come to visit him when he fell ill, which made him feel even more lonely and fearful. In fact, the relationship between Charles VIII and Queen Anne was very ordinary. Because Anne was almost forcibly abducted by Charles VIII. Before that, Anne had completed the wedding ceremony with Maximilian I through proxy marriage. But Charles VIII intervened, forcibly abducted Anne, and forcefully married her. Therefore, Anne has never had a good impression of Charles VIII. Of course, it is not that Queen Anne is obsessed with the old man Maximilian I. Rather, Anne of Brittany feels that Charles VIII is a robber, and that forcibly abducting her is a great disrespect to herself. After Charles VIII married Anne, he did not pay attention to coaxing Anne, who was only 15 years old at the time, but directly raped her, which caused Anne a great psychological trauma. After that, when Charles VIII's eldest son, Charles Orlando, died, Charles VIII did not comfort his wife, but forced her to change and ask for another child. It can be said that Charles VIII never cared about what Queen Anne thought. He only thought about having an heir. The consequence of Charles VIII ignoring Queen Anne's physical and mental problems was that his next few children all died young. Marin actually knew about this. In fact, Queen Anne's body was not well taken care of, and coupled with the trauma of her heart, it was strange that her children could be healthy. If Charles VIII had taken good care of Queen Anne's body and thoughts, the Queen would not have given birth to several children and then died. In fact, Queen Anne's health had been greatly damaged by several unscientific consecutive births. If Charles VIII had stopped this barbaric and unscientific birth requirement and taken care of Queen Anne, she would have had a chance to give birth to healthy children. Unfortunately, Charles VIII only wanted children and did not care about Queen Anne's physical condition. Therefore, none of the 7 children survived. After the death of Charles VIII, Anne remarried the new king, Louis XII. Because there was a gap of several months between them, Queen Anne was able to recover. When Queen Anne remarried Louis XII in 1499, she finally gave birth to a child who survived in infancy, Claudia of France, Queen of Francis I. Of course, because Queen Anne was in poor health, Princess Claudia did not live long either, and died before she was 25 years old. Charles VIII suffered a severe mental blow due to the death of his youngest son Henry, which made him begin to seriously doubt his life. At this time, because of his previous rudeness and arbitrary behavior, Queen Anne ignored him even when he was seriously ill. In fact, Queen Anne herself was also very sad and had no mood to care about this unfortunate child, Charles VIII. As a result, Charles VIII, who was only 28 years old, was in increasingly poor health. Although Charles VIII did not die on April 7 as originally stated in history, he did not last long due to a mental breakdown. Finally, on June 20, 1498, Charles VIII died in the Louvre. As for Marin, he had no news yet. In fact, as early as March, Marin had secretly sent people to Paris to inquire about the news of Charles VIII. In April, the news from Paris did not include the death of Charles VIII. As for the fact that Charles VIII was seriously ill, this news was definitely kept secret by the French government and the public. So, at first, Marin thought that because of his butterfly effect, Charles VIII did not die. Unexpectedly, it only delayed the date of Charles VIII's death by more than 2 months. When the news of Charles VIII's death came from Paris in July, Marin finally laughed out loud. As for why he laughed out loud, it was actually very simple. Because he had offended Charles VIII to death, Marin had always been worried that Charles VIII would secretly retaliate against him. But now that Charles VIII is dead, does France still want to take revenge on him? Louis XII, who succeeded him, would not only not hate him, but might even be secretly grateful to him. Because, if it weren't for Marin's attack, Charles VIII might not have died. Of course, Louis XII didn't know that without Marin, Charles VIII would have died, and he would have died more than 2 months earlier. Once Charles VIII died, the French no longer had any reason to be at odds with Marin. Although the French nobles who were defeated or captured by Marin might be hostile to Marin, they were the masters of France and could not allow France to continue to hate Marin. The next master of France was Louis XII. After he came to power, he would definitely purge Charles VIII's powerful ministers and replace them with his trusted confidants. By then, it would be even less likely that France would remember to send someone to kill him. Therefore, after learning the news of Charles VIII's death, Marin felt as if the 3 mountains pressing on his heart had collapsed, and he felt extremely relaxed. Chapter 191, Trade in India. Calicut, southwest of the Indian Peninsula. Columbus's fleet had arrived at Calicut for more than a month. Logically, Columbus should have ended his voyage and returned. However, Columbus had to wait for a while longer to wait for the clove ships from the Spice Islands of Indonesia, and even after waiting for more than a month, Da Gama's fleet did not arrive. In fact, after leaving Malindi, Da Gama headed north and arrived in Mogadishu in the Somalia region before he spent money to find out the location of India. Then, Da Gama ordered the fleet to sail northeast. More than a month after Columbus arrived in Calicut, Da Gama's fleet arrived at Surat on the west coast of India. Surat is also an important commercial port in western India. It is closer to the Arab region and has a prosperous business. However, the price of spices is slightly different. Of course, the price of pepper in Surat and Calicut is similar, because India is the origin of pepper. However, the price of cloves, cinnamon and nutmeg is higher than that in Calicut. Because cinnamon is produced in Sri Lanka, while cloves and nutmeg are produced in the Spice Islands of Indonesia. It still costs a lot to ship them from overseas, so the price cannot be lowered. In Surat and Calicut, pepper costs 1.5 pfennigs a pound, but cinnamon, cloves and nutmeg are priced differently. In Calicut, because it is close to the south and Sri Lanka, the price of cinnamon is also 1.5 pfennigs per pound. When Arab sailors go to the Spice Islands to ask the local natives for cloves and nutmeg, the purchase price is very cheap. Therefore, even if it is shipped to Calicut, India, it is still 1.5 pfennigs per pound. But in Surat, the price is higher. For example, the price of cinnamon, cloves and nutmeg is about 1.7 pfennigs per pound. Of course, even with such a huge price difference, Da Gama was ecstatic. Because in Europe, the price of spices, whether pepper, cinnamon, cloves or nutmeg, was more than 10 shillings per pound. Even if he spent 2 pfennigs per pound to purchase them, he would still make a lot of money if he shipped them back to Europe. Columbus's fleet was in Calicut not just to purchase spices. Under Marin's instructions, Draka also went everywhere to look for soybeans. However, this thing is not difficult to find. At a roadside stall, Draka soon found the legendary soybeans. He took out the picture given by Marin and compared it. Draka was sure that this was what he needed. So he immediately bought 10 large sacks of soybeans, and the cost was only 5 gold coins. In Europe, even the cheapest rye costs 1.6 gold coins per sack. Needless to say, wheat costs 8 gold coins per sack. In India, a sack of soybeans only costs 0.5 gold coins, which is much cheaper than the price of rye in Europe. After purchasing soybeans, Draka began to sell colored glass products worth 10,000 gold coins, which were a specialty of Venice. However, this thing was neither popular nor unsaleable. It was not very popular. In fact, colored glass products were not particularly rare in India. Because Venetian merchants also sold a lot of colored glass products to India through Arab merchants. Therefore, Indians had seen colored glass products before. Therefore, they did not have the desire to rush to buy these colored glass products. Therefore, Draka has been selling glass products in Calicut for more than a month. In addition to waiting for the spice ships from the Spice Islands, it is because the colored glass products are selling slowly. However, when the spice ships from the Spice Islands arrived in Calicut, they were more interested in the colored glass products of Draka. Because these colored glass products may not be rare for Indians, but the natives of the Spice Islands like them. So, the Arab owner of the spice ship ate the ordinary colored glass products left over from Draka and exchanged them for spices. The colored glassware worth 10,000 gold coins was soon exchanged for spices. These spices weighed 400,000 pounds, equivalent to 181 tons. Columbus had to vacate 2.5 ships' cargo holds to load these spices. Then, Draka took out the 17,000 gold coins that Marin had prepared for him. Originally, Marin gave Draka 20,000 gold coins. However, Draka followed Marin's instructions and used gold coins to bribe local chiefs and princes in Malindi and Calicut, spending 3,000 gold coins. Of course, this was not in vain. The chief of Malindi became a good friend and sent the navigator to help guide the way. The prince of Calicut also showed great kindness and sent people to help, preventing them, a group of outsiders, from being cheated by the locals. For example, when Vasco da Gama first came to India, he was actually cheated by the merchants of Calicut. Because the gifts they gave to the prince of Calicut were too shabby, the local prince didn't pay much attention to him. When he went to buy spices, the spices that were sold to others for 1.5 pfennigs per pound were sold to Vasco da Gama for 2 pfennigs per pound. Of course, even so, the profits of Vasco da Gama's fleet were still very profitable. Because the price difference between European and Indian spices was too big. Draka calculated that the fleet was now loaded with 181 tons of spices. However, the total cargo capacity of the 4 ships was only 260 tons. In other words, the fleet now had less than 80 tons of cargo capacity. Draka thought about it and decided to buy some other things. For example, gemstones that were selling well in the local area. In addition, he also bought a large amount of copper. In Europe, the price ratio of silver to copper was about 1 to 15 at this time. In India, the price ratio of silver to copper was 1 to 100. Draka remembered that Marin once said that he wanted to make more cannons. So he started to purchase copper ingots so that he could use them to make cannons for Marin. To this end, Draka spent 10,000 gold coins to buy 35 tons of copper. Then, he also bought several tons of gems and other rare items. Then, Draka remembered that it seemed that Marin was going to India to purchase saltpeter. So he went to look for saltpeter again. Indian saltpeter was indeed cheap, only 2.72 pfennigs per pound. 1 ton of saltpeter only cost 150 gold coins. At this time, the price of European saltpeter was at least 10 pfennigs per pound. The higher price could be 15 pfennigs per pound. The most important thing was that the production of saltpeter in Europe was small. If you wanted to buy a large quantity, you couldn't buy it at all. Because the saltpeter in Europe was basically found in toilets, and the output was very small. In India, saltpeter was abundant and cheap. No wonder the British East India Company made a fortune after intervening in the Indian saltpeter trade. Draka bought 30 tons of saltpeter at once, packed it tightly in waterproof leather bags, and placed it in the bilge of the last ship to prevent water and fire. Then, the ship was filled with cargo. After purchasing another batch of food and storing a batch of fresh water using the heated mud sealing method, Columbus officially returned with his fleet. As for the return route, of course, it was the original route. Now, even without Majid, Columbus was confident that he could return smoothly along the original route with the help of the logbook. Because he was an excellent veteran in the sailing world.